We are now 4 weeks into the 2023 college football season, and there are currently 26 undefeated teams. Today we're to rank every single one of them. I'm going to go through my personal opinion on each, go through my ranking of each, and talk about why they are ranked where they are. But before we get started, if you're a big college football fan, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what topic I should cover in my next one. And now let's get started and rank every unbeaten team left in college football. So at number 26, we have Georgia State. The Panthers are not typically a dominant program, but so far they are first in the Sun Belt and off to a 4-0 start. While it's great that they are undefeated, their wins really aren't that great. They barely beat an FCS Rhode Island team, took care of a winless UConn team, beat Charlotte, and also beat Coastal Carolina. This is not the same Coastal program since Jamie Chadwell left, so good for the Panthers being 4-0. We're going to talk about Jamie Chadwell's new team, the Liberty Flames. So far in their first year in the Conference USA, they are off to a 4-0 start. In Week 1, they took care of Bowling Green. In Week 2, they beat New Mexico State. In Week 3, they beat a really bad Buffalo team. And most recently, they beat Florida International. None of those wins really pop off the page, but Liberty is 4-0, and they should have another easy win over Sam Houston before a big game against Jacksonville State. I have to talk about Air Force. The Falcons may actually need their own video at some point, as they've been arguably the most underrated program in college football over the last few years. They're once again off to a hot start, as they are 4-0 and in my opinion the second best team in the Mountain West. They've beaten Robert Morris, Sam Houston State, Utah State, and most recently San Jose State. None of those wins are really that big, but Air Force has been pretty dominant in all of their wins, and they look to be having another great season. Up next, we get to talk about James Madison. Last year was their first year in the FBS, and their second year is off to another great start. In Week 1, they beat Bucknell, in Week 3, they beat Troy, and last weekend they beat Utah State. While Virginia is awful, the Dukes did go into Charlottesville and beat the Cavaliers, and this was a huge program win for them, and a win over a Power 5 team on the road. Good for James Madison, and right now they should be on the fast track to winning the Sun Belt. Up next, we get a chance to talk about a couple more Power 5 schools, and the first one is 4-0 Syracuse. In recent memory, the Orange have gotten off to a great start, but usually fall off by the end of the year. Will that happen again this season? I don't know. But so far, they blanked Colgate 65-0, destroyed Western Michigan 48-7, went on the road and beat Purdue 35-20, and this past weekend beat Army 29-16. The Purdue win is pretty impressive, but the Boilermakers have looked pretty bad this year, and we'll see what the Orange are really made of this Saturday when they host Clemson. After that, they get North Carolina and Florida State, so we'll find out pretty quickly if they are legit or if they will fall off once again. Up next, we're going to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats. So far, the Cats are 4-0, but they've left a lot to be desired in my opinion. They ended up beating Ball State in Week 1, struggled with Eastern Kentucky in Week 2, beat Akron in Week 3, and then most recently beat Vanderbilt 45-28. So far, they are 4-0, but they've really struggled in the first half of games, and Kentucky has not been as explosive or as dominant as I thought they would be. We'll find out a lot in the next few weeks, though, as they play ranked teams in 5 of their next 6 games. Some are saying this is the best Kentucky team in recent memory, and we'll start to see if that's true in the next few games. Now we get to talk about Kentucky's arch rival, Louisville. Currently they are 4-0 and have a couple of decent wins. They took care of Georgia Tech on the first Friday night of college football, beat Murray State 56-0 at 9 quarterbacks, beat Indiana 21-14, and most recently beat Boston College 56-28. The most respectable win on there is that Georgia Tech game in my opinion, as both IU and Boston College are horrible. They have beaten 3 Power 5 opponents, and things are looking good in Jeff Brom's first year. The next couple weeks though will show what they are really made of. After Louisville, we get to talk about a former ACC school in Maryland. A lot of people were hyping up the Terrapins this past offseason as they have a great senior quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, and many believe that Mike Locksley was finally going to put it all together. So far, they've actually been pretty solid. They killed Towson in Week 1, beat Charlotte pretty badly in Week 2, and have now won consecutive games against Power 5 schools. The first win came in a dominant victory over Virginia, and this past weekend they went on the road and beat Michigan State. While I do like those 2 wins, they are arguably against the worst Power 5 team from each respective conference. This next weekend, things should be pretty easy for them as they get to host Indiana, but after that, they get a test against Ohio State. That's when we'll find out if Maryland is a truly elite team or just another average bowl team. From there, we get to go to the number 25 team in the country in Fresno State. Despite losing Caleb DeBoer a year ago, the Fresno State Bulldogs have done a tremendous job and look like the best team in the Mountain West. In Week 1, they went on the road and beat Purdue. In Week 2, they survived against Eastern Washington, and then in the past 2 weeks, they have looked great. They went on the road and destroyed Arizona State 29-0, and most recently beat Kent State 53-10. Because of that, the Bulldogs jumped into the polls, and Mikey Keene is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. The Bulldogs should continue to cruise, as they'll have Nevada next week before what should be a test against Wyoming on the road. Right now they look great, and it's been quite the season for Fresno. Before we continue on, be sure to leave a comment of what you think of the rankings so far and what topic I should cover next. The next team we need to talk about is the Kansas Jayhawks. Lance Leipold has done a remarkable job building up this program, and after many thought they were a fluke in 2022, they have got out to a hot start in 2023. So far, the Jayhawks are 4-0, ranked number 24 in the country, and have 4 wins. They beat FCS Missouri State in Week 1, took care of Illinois 34-23 in Week 2, went on the road and beat Nevada in Week 3, and this past weekend won their first conference game against BYU. While I don't think Illinois and BYU are any good, they have 2 wins over Power 5 opponents, are putting up a lot of points, and it's Kansas for Pete's sake. They are not usually this good. After that, we get to talk about the Miami Hurricanes. While some might think it's controversial I have them this far back, the major factor into the ranking is who they've beat and how well they have looked. In Week 1, they beat Miami of Ohio 38-3 before a huge Week 2 victory against number 23 Texas A&M. That is right now the Hurricanes' marquee win, as after that, they beat Bethune-Cookman and Temple. They dominated both of those games, but so far, 3 of their 4 wins have come against lousy opponents. We'll find out a little bit more in the coming weeks as they get both North Carolina and Clemson. For now though, Miami is ranked here. After that, we get to talk about my school, the Missouri Tigers. To be honest, I thought the Tigers would be 3-1 right now with a loss to Kansas State. But that's not how it played out. After beating South Dakota in Week 1, they almost blew it against Middle Tennessee State in Week 2. In Week 3, in a game that I was personally at, they knocked off their old Big 12 rival Kansas State by way of a 61-yard game-winning field goal. It was one of the most insane moments I've ever seen in person, and a huge win for Elijah Drinkwitz. This past weekend, despite a beat-up quarterback, they took care of Memphis, and the game was never really in doubt. They're currently 4-0, and if they beat Vanderbilt, they could set up for a monster game against LSU at home. For now though, this is where the Tigers rank. After that, we get to talk about the success story of the year so far in the Duke Blue Devils. While I've always been high on Mike Elko, and actually predicted his rise, the Devils have put it together this year, and they are now 4-0. They're currently ranked number 17 in the country, as in Week 1, they beat number 9 Clemson 28-7, in what was to many a shocker. In Week 2, they destroyed Lafayette, before beating both Northwestern and UConn in Weeks 3 and 4. The Clemson win is the heart of this resume, as Northwestern is awful and UConn is winless. Duke seems like last year's Kansas, and we'll find out a lot this weekend as they have a nationally televised game against number 11 Notre Dame at home. I am super pumped to watch this. Up next, many of you are going to disagree with this, but I have the Utah Utes. While they are 4-0 and ranked number 10 in the country, they have just not looked that dominant. Their best performance was by far in Week 1 against Florida, as they won that game 24-11 despite not having Cam Rising. In Week 2, they had an extremely sluggish start, but pulled away late against Baylor, who we have now found out is not very good. After that, they beat Weber State, and this past weekend beat UCLA 14-7. Utah's only scored 2 passing touchdowns the entire year, and while they do have a really good defense, they haven't looked that impressive in their wins, but they are getting wins, which is what is extremely important. When Cam Rising gets back, things should go back to normal, but in a loaded Pac-12, I'm not sure how much longer they can sustain this without their star quarterback. Going over to another Pac-12 school, we have to talk about Wazoo. Jake Dickert has done a tremendous job building this Cougars program, and a big reason for that is their star quarterback Cam Ward. After transferring in from Incarnate Word, Ward has become one of the best kept secrets in the country and has led them to 2 ranked wins. They beat Colorado State in Week 1, took care of number 19 Wisconsin in Week 2, beat Northern Colorado in Week 3, and this past weekend helped them upset number 14 Oregon State at home. While they did almost blow the game, the Cougars right now are playing some of their best football we've seen in years, hopefully it'll translate down the line. If they can beat UCLA and Arizona, they could be setting themselves up for a monster game with Oregon in a couple weeks. We'll have to wait and see. Washington State football is a lot of fun. Up next, we're going to have the most controversial take of the entire video, and I know Wolverines fans are going to be really upset, but this is where I have Michigan ranked. As I said earlier in the video, part of my ranking system is who you have played. No offense, but Michigan has played the worst schedule of any Power 5 opponent on this list. They beat East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green in weeks 1 through 3, and this past weekend beat Rutgers. No offense, but none of those wins really mean anything, and the only reason the Wolverines are even ranked this high is because they've been dominant in all of them. If they want to move up higher on the list, they need to beat some real schools. Unfortunately, nothing's really going to change, as their next 5 games come against some of the worst teams in the conference. We'll find out a lot towards the end of the year in the Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State games. For now though, Michigan has got to show me a little bit more than just being able to beat up on Group of 5 teams. Now we get to the top 10, and I have another controversial take. I think the Georgia Bulldogs deserve to be 10th on this list. Once again, Bulldogs fans are going to be super upset down in the comment section below, but my question is, who have you beat? You beat an FCS UT Martin team, a horrible Ball State team, and a UAB team at home. You then played one good half of football against South Carolina, a team that is only 500, and there really is no reason based on that resume to rank you any higher than 10th in my opinion. Well, in terms of their actual talent and potential, they are a top 3 team. Right now, they just haven't done anything. We'll have to wait and see for the next few weeks when the schedule gets a little bit tougher. At number 9, the same concept is sort of applying to Oklahoma. While I was somewhat skeptical of the Sooners this offseason, they have come out smoking hot. They destroyed Arkansas State 73-0 in week 1, destroyed a decent SMU team in week 2, went on the road and hung 66 points on Tulsa, and then this past weekend went into Cincinnati and won 20-6. While Cincy and SMU aren't the greatest wins in the world, they are better than Georgia's wins, and Oklahoma has looked completely dominant so far, and I think that's going to continue, and they'll be 5-0 playing Texas. That'll be quite the game. After that, I have USC. While some will disagree with this ranking, the Trojans also haven't played the toughest schedule. They beat San Jose State in week 1, took care of a horrible Nevada team in week 2, and then beat the 2 worst teams in the Pac-12 in Stanford and Arizona State. While they have looked dominant in each and every one of those wins, I still think the USC defense needs a little bit better, and they need to have some more quality wins. Luckily, they have plenty of big games on the schedule as they get Colorado, Notre Dame, and Utah just in the next month. I'm really excited to watch those games, and USC right now is a legit playoff contender. After that, we get to stay in the Pac-12 and talk about Washington. Right now, the Huskies are in a similar boat to the Trojans in my eyes, as so far they have looked dominant in their games. In week 1, they beat Boise State, and at first it looked like an impressive win, but the Broncos turned out to be a fluke. In week 2, they destroyed Tulsa. In week 3, Penix had an insane performance against Michigan State, and then this past weekend, they beat Cal. Unfortunately for the Huskies, the 3 solid teams they've beat have ended up being terrible, and while I do think Washington is legit, I want to see them play better competition before I rank them any higher. After that, you get North Carolina. So far, the Tar Heels are off to a 4-0 start. They've beaten 3 Power 5 opponents as they knocked off South Carolina and Charlotte in week 1, defeated Minnesota at home in week 3, and last week went on the road and beat Pitt. They also have a win over a solid team in Appalachian State, and while that game was a little bit too close for comfort, the Tar Heels have beat 4 solid programs. Drake May looks pretty good, and right now, they're hoping to win an ACC championship. After that, we're going to talk about the Oregon Ducks. In week 1, they put up 81 points against Portland State. In week 2, they survived an upset bid against Texas Tech, and then in the last 2 weeks, they have completely dominated. They killed Hawaii 55-10, and finally put an end to the Coach Prime stuff as they beat number 19 Colorado 42-6. Oregon put the Buffaloes in their place, Dan Lanning delivered on his promise, and led by Bo Nix, Oregon looks to be a legitimate playoff contender. After that, we get to talk about Texas. At first, I would have argued that Texas had the most impressive win of the year against Alabama, but the Crimson Tide look a little bit off this year, and while it still is a top 3 win in my opinion of the season, it's why I have Texas at number 4 instead. They killed Rice in week 1, as I said, beat Bama in week 2, and after struggling with Wyoming for 3 quarters, put it on the Cowboys and won 31-10. This past week, they went on the road and beat Baylor, and while that is a solid win, in my opinion, the Bears might be the 2nd worst team in the Big 12, so the win isn't that great. Luckily, the next 2 games will be important for Texas as they get to play number 24 Kansas and then the Red River game. At number 3, I have Penn State. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I have been high on this Penn State team all offseason. In week 1, they beat West Virginia, and that win is looking more impressive. In week 2, they put up 63 on Delaware. In week 3, they dominated Illinois on the road, and then this past weekend, they shut out number 24 Iowa 31-0. They have 3 Power 5 wins, have looked dominant in each and every game, and Penn State has a legitimate chance of winning the Big Ten in my opinion. They are going to have to get through Ohio State and Michigan first. For now, Penn State has delivered on all the hype and all the potential. At number 2, I have Ohio State. In week 1, they beat Indiana. In week 2, they beat Youngstown State. And in week 3, they beat Western Kentucky. The big takeaway from their first 2 games was Kyle McCord, as many wondered if he was actually going to be the quarterback Ohio State fans thought he could be. While there were some kinks to work out in those first 3 games, they finally put it all together in week 4, and in my opinion, got the most impressive win of the season so far. They went into a hostile environment and knocked off number 9 Notre Dame. I was personally at this game, and it was pretty insane. After their offense stalled in the first half, Their defense made a couple big stops, Travion Henderson had a big play, and then Kyle McCord led them down the field and helped them score a touchdown with no time remaining. This was a ginormous win, and I think Ohio State is looking pretty legit. They get a sneaky Maryland team in 2 weeks, then travel on the road to Purdue before a huge matchup with number 6 Penn State. Ohio State is my number 2 team in the country right now, and that leaves Florida State at number 1. I'm sure there'll be some people who are pretty upset with this take, but the Noles have some pretty impressive wins so far. In week 1, they dominated number 5 LSU, who in my opinion is going to win the SEC West, before coming home and putting up 66 on Southern Miss. They did almost blow the game on the road to Boston College, but put it all together this past weekend and went on the road and beat Clemson. While the Tigers are 2-2, that is still one of the most impressive wins in college football this season so far, and in my opinion, the Seminoles are legit. Their wins over Clemson and LSU are as good as anybody. They've beaten 3 Power 5 teams, and I think resume-wise deserve to be number 1. In my opinion right now, there is a ton of parity in college football, and really any of those top 15 teams are pretty similar. So the next few weeks are going to be pretty exciting, and I have no idea how this list is going to change over the next few weeks. I'll continue to do this video weekly, but for now, let me know what you think down below. What did I get right and wrong? Where would you rank teams, and what topics should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video. Subscribe if you're new. Check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.